How Sex Drives Evolution by Kevin, Paula, and Cindy. The peacock. The peacock had become a symbol that embodied everything against natural selection. Why would an animal grow such an elaborate and colorful tail? A tail that attracts predators all too easily and takes up energy by having to be grown every year. This tail seems to go against everything Darwin proposed. In fact, Darwin hated the sight of a peacock's tail. This tail would surely hinder this animal's ability to survive in the wild, and yet we see that it doesn't. Why? Here we see more examples of traits and behaviors that don't make sense under true natural selection. The Australian male bowerbird constructs bowers that could span 10 feet across and 5 feet tall. This bower takes up a lot of the bird's energy that could be used in a more productive activity. Keep in mind that bowers could take up to days to erect, but yet the male bowerbird thinks it's worth the trouble. As well, we see a bright red marker on the male red-collared widowbird. Surely all this marker would do is scream to predators, "Eat me." So why hasn't natural selection eliminated this phenotype? On top of that, widowbirds possess an extremely long tail, a tail that has been shown to hinder its flight. And yet natural selection hasn't stepped in, and we are still left asking one single question: why? Jerry Husak conducted an experiment to prove that bright colors on an animal are a clear disadvantage. He set up clay models shaped in the shape of a collared lizard. Males were painted with the turquoise body and yellow head, like they appear in the wild, and females were painted grayish brown with a few white spots, just like how they appear in the wild. He set them in the desert, and since they were made of clay, the bite marks of the predators would stay embedded. After a week, the results showed bright colored animals are at a clear disadvantage, with 35 out of 40 male clay models showing bite marks, and none of the female models showed, showed bite marks. How could this difference between genders possibly arisen? This difference between genders is called sexual dimorphism. The differences could be in color, shape, size, and even structure. Here we see birds of paradise, one male and one female. Clearly, the male looks nothing like the female. How could this have arisen under evolutionary theory?
These differences in traits may be less beneficial for males for survival. However, sexual selection increases an individual's chance of getting a mate and surviving through reproduction. Sexual selection is just part of the natural selection evolutionary process, but proves to be most effective at being the driving force of sexual dimorphism. Male frogs, for example, make singing noises to attract a female. Although this could jeopardize their existence and lure prey, their main focus is to reproduce by attraction of females. Sexual selection comes in two forms, the first being male to male competition or intersexual selection. This type of selection is direct competition for access to females. Males will have physical battles to win over females, for example, battles of deer that clash antlers. Selection will favor stronger weapons and bigger sizes that will aid a male in physical contests. In some species, direct competition leads to males that are polygynous or males that mate with more than one female. Alpha males that win physical contests are the strongest males and have more access to females. Direct competition also leads to floaters, or males that sneak copulations with females by invading another male's territory. For example, the red-winged blackbird will sneak into another male's territory. The songs we're used to hearing are actually warnings to other males to stay away. After males have copulated with a female, that doesn't guarantee that her offspring will be his. Post-mating competition are males that protect females that have been inseminating. Millipedes will climb a female for several days to protect her eggs from being claimed by another male. Another example of post-mating competition are chemicals that a male can produce that temporarily close the female's reproductive tract so that another male can't inseminate her. Other chemicals in the male's semen also cause a female to refrain from remating for the next few days. These defensive mechanisms of post-mating competition are matched by the offensive tactics of some species of males. Damselflies, for example, have an offensive mechanism called the penis scoop. When a male mates with an already inseminated female, the male damselfly will use backward pointed spines on its penis to remove the sperm of other males and will then inseminate her once all the sperm is removed. In fruit flies, it has been observed that a male can inactivate the sperm of another male with its own sperm. The second kind of sexual selection is female choosiness or intersexual selection. Females choose who they want to mate with. Males with bigger feathers, brighter colors, better sounds, larger sizes, longer tails, and other features that demonstrate strong and better phenotypes are chosen by females the most. This kind of competition is indirect. There is no physical contact between males. They fight for a female by how big their nests are, how bright their feathers may be, or how they smell. These traits are more attractive because they may represent strong genotypes. Here, a male widowbird's long tail is far more attractive than a widowbird with a shorter tail.
How sex arose in the first place is one of the many great mysteries of evolution. Why would you want to pass on only half of your genome compared to 100% like asexual organisms? As a matter of fact, why wouldn't females just reproduce parthogenetically? That is, producing eggs that develop without fertilization. Imagine a scenario where a species could reproduce parthogenetically or by sex. You would soon see that the gene for parthenogenesis would outcompete the sexual reproduction gene. This scenario is called the twofold cost of sex. Some theories to why sex arose include random shuffling of the genome that occurs during sexual reproduction. This shuffling produces new genetic combinations in the next generation. Sex could also promote faster evolution by bringing together favorable genes in one individual. Faster evolution is helpful in keeping up with an ever-changing environment. Sex is also useful for removing bad genes from a species by recombining all the deleterious alleles into one severely unfit individual. Even with all these advantages, though, biologists still aren't sure if they outweigh the twofold cost of sex. Once sex has arisen, natural selection soon follows. Another feature of sexually reproducing organisms also arises: two sexes. Two sexes is the most robust and stable strategy. If there are more than two sexes in a species, evolution will eliminate those extra sexes until just two remain. Theoreticians have shown that natural selection will favor a sex that produces small sperm or pollen, and that sex is typically called male, and another sex that produces few large eggs, typically called female. Having this difference in gamete size paves the way for sexual selection. Since males can produce larger quantities of sperm, they tend to be more promiscuous. Males are only limited by the amount of females he can attract. Females, on the other hand, produce eggs that are much more valuable than sperm. Because of this, females get to choose who they want to mate with. Since they will put most of the energy into raising the offspring, females want to make sure they raise the best offspring possible, and that requires mating with the best possible male. Since females can get a mate without much trouble, there is less variance in mating success within females. On the other hand, not all males get to mate, so we would expect a much more higher variance in mating success. We see in nature species that are socially monogamous and sexually dimorph. Why would this arise if males don't seem to compete for females? As it turns out, these species aren't actually monogamous. They are socially monogamous. For example, male and female splendid fairy wren may spend their entire life with their social mate, co-defending their territory and sharing parental care. But when it comes time to mate, they tend to mate with other males. So since males will still have to attract females, that explains why they possess bright blue and black colors. Species that have male and females that look similar tend to be truly monogamous. Some examples of truly monogamous species are parrots, geese, and pigeons. In monogamous mating systems, animals pair off with a partner and raise their young together. What we end up seeing is a strong relationship between mating systems and sexual dimorphism. If males aren't made to compete for females, we don't see sexual dimorphism. We also see in nature a scenario where roles are reversed. Males now spend more energy towards producing offspring, and females are expendable. Since males invest more time into the development of offspring, they get to choose a mate, and that creates competition among females. And just like what you would expect to see in a traditional male versus male mating system, females are now the lavish and decorated sex, while males tend to be more plain. This is exactly what you would expect to see under sexual selection.
Alfred Russel Wallace was dubious of the normal choice, that is to say, that it was the females who chose their mates. He theorized that females were less colorful so that they could be camouflaged from predators, and that males were colorful as a byproduct of their physiology. He was ultimately wrong. Charles Darwin came up with his own theory that male calls, colors, and ornaments evolved through female choice, and that this choice was based on pure aesthetics. Darwin was pioneering the study of sexual selection. However, Wallace realized that there was a problem with Darwin's theories. He questioned, did animals such as flies and beetles really have an aesthetic sense like we do? Darwin pled ignorance on this front. It turns out that Darwin was closer to the truth. Females are the ones that choose their mates, and this seems to explain sexual dimorphism. There is evidence that also shows that female preferences are also adaptive, and that certain types of males help females spread their genes. But what are the benefits to the female? The type of benefits are placed under two categories, direct and indirect. Direct benefits include picking a male that will help the female produce more or healthier young during the act of childcare. Indirect benefits include choosing a male who has better genes than those of other males. The evolution of female preferences will be favored by natural selection. Direct benefits also include females mating with males who have better territories, while an indirect benefit would be females mating with males that have genes that make them resistant to disease. This explains why females prefer certain males, but does not explain why they prefer certain features like bright colors or elaborate plumage. An example of female choice is the North American housefinch. The females are brown and the males have bright colors on their head and breast, as shown in the photo. In choosing a male with bright plumage, a female is choosing a healthy male. The females remain drab because there is no benefit for them in being bright. An indirect benefit of this, that their offspring will have good genes. A complex scenario, but it's the best explanation. The good genes model indicates that three types of genes will increase in frequency together. Genes for male, indicator trait, that reflects that the male has good genes. Genes that make a female prefer the indicator trait, and the good genes whose presence is reflected by the indicator. This model was tested in an experiment done by Alison Welch with gray tree frogs. The results of this experiment suggest that a long call is a sign of a healthy male with good genes, and that the females who chose those males produced genetically better offspring. The good genes model remains the favored explanation for sexual selection. Another simpler model that may explain sexual dimorphism is the sensory bias model. This model assumes that sexual selection is driven by pre-existing biases in females' nervous system. These biases could be a byproduct of natural selection. This model was tested by creating a new trait in males and checking if females liked it in the Australian grassfinch experiment performed by Nancy Burley and Richard Senesik. The females in this experiment preferred the altered males, which had white artificial crests, to the males that had red or green crests or normal uncrested males. The reasons as to why are unknown. To conclude, Darwin's theory of animal aesthetics was partially correct. However, he mistook female preferences as a taste for the beautiful.